Hello, welcome once again to the Fair-Minded Christian YouTube channel. I'm your host, Stephen. Today is part 6 in our series called Trinity, Believe It or Not, Trinity, Believe It or Else. And today we're going to tackle the question, is the Trinity clearly and explicitly mentioned in the Bible? Let's get started. Well, the simple answer is no, it is not. However, Trinitarian scholars will say that even though it is not explicitly mentioned, the concept of the Trinity doctrine is contained within Scripture. And from there, in order to prove their point, they will show you various isolated texts in support of the doctrine, all the while ignoring the overall context of the book of the Bible that they are quoting from. Now, this is the quintessential example of what is known as proof texting. And as the old saying goes, a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. When religious doctrines or theological concepts are not clearly and explicitly mentioned in the Bible, it becomes a matter of opinion. And people have a tendency to find various ways to support their strongly held opinions. This, however, clouds our thinking by removing our natural objectivity and replacing it with subjectivity. And we become prisoners of our own biases and presuppositions. If you think about it, there are an infinite number of religious doctrines or theological concepts that we impose upon the Scriptures without any clear and explicit proof of it in the Bible. And just because we may have a strong opinion on it doesn't necessarily make it true or critical to one's faith. For instance, what if I told you that I held a belief in the doctrine of Petrine preexistence? What is that, you may be thinking? Well, it means that I believe that the Apostle Peter in the Bible pre-existed his birth. And if I held a very strong opinion on it, I could easily come up with a rule that anyone who didn't agree with my belief in the doctrine of Petrine preexistence could not be part of my faith community or church. The doctrine goes something like this. In Mark chapter 8, verse 33, Jesus called Peter Satan when he said, "But when he turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, 'Get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men.'" Now, according to Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, Satan is referred to as the serpent of old and the devil as follows. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. We also know that in Genesis chapter 3, that it was the serpent who tempted Eve, which ultimately led to both her and Adam falling into sin. This is confirmed in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14 as follows. "And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, fell into transgression." Therefore, we can conclude that Peter pre-existed his incarnation as that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So it was really Peter in the Garden of Eden who tempted Eve to sin. And I can go even further to support this doctrine by pointing out key events recorded in the Bible surrounding Peter's life, such as Peter was frequently shown to be incompetent because he took longer to catch on to the things that Jesus was teaching. Peter had a habit of challenging Jesus on occasion. Peter actually outed Jesus as the Messiah when Jesus wasn't ready. Peter also founded the Catholic Church according to Jesus and according to traditional historical Catholic doctrine. And Peter actually denied that he even knew Jesus when he was challenged during Jesus' trial and crucifixion. Now, obviously, I'm being completely ridiculous at this point, because there is no such thing as Petrine preexistence. The fact of the matter is that when Jesus called Peter Satan, he was speaking metaphorically, not literally, because the term Satan simply means adversary. And because Peter wanted to prevent Jesus from being crucified, at that moment, Peter was in fact acting as an adversary to Jesus' mission here on earth, a mission given to him by God our Father to die for the sins of mankind. This practice of speaking metaphorically is common even today. For instance, if you have a child who is a really good basketball player, you very well may call him Jordan or Kobe sometimes, figuratively speaking, of course. Now, you know very well that the child isn't literally Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. My point here in using Peter as an example is to simply show that I can easily come up with a theological concept that I believe is in the Bible and then find various proof texts to support this concept and ultimately make it a required religious doctrine within my respective church or denomination. Now, as many scholars know, this is not proper biblical exegesis or hermeneutics. It's actually a form of eisegesis, where we read our own meaning and thoughts into the text of Scripture. Unfortunately, this is the same methodology used to support the Trinity doctrine, because even though one may find biblical texts to support the concept, there really isn't a clear, emphatic scripture that indicates that God is one being or office occupied by three separate persons, or that God is one being who manifests himself as three separate persons or natures. At the end of the day, because it's rooted in opinion rather than fact, the doctrine of the Trinity is more of what I would call an oral tradition, passed down from generation to generation and propagated through various Bible translations, church doctrinal statements, teachings, and even song. Now, it doesn't make someone a bad person for believing in the doctrine of the Trinity. We should all be free to believe as we choose. However, it is wrong to impose this doctrine on other Christians who choose not to believe it by means of ridicule, threats, or even excommunication. And now, on to our next and final question in part 7 of Trinity, Believe It or Not, Trinity, Believe It or Else.